Since the release of Little Nightmares back in April of 2017, the developers have forced us to relive our greatest childhood fears. Whether it be a trip to the doctors, facing our bullies at school, or being lost and alone in an unfamiliar environment. So when I say that I believe a significant portion of this game revolves around sugar and sweets and lollipops, you'd be forgiven for assuming that I've become so lost in the nowhere that I've gone mad. But I implore you, little ones, stick around. You're gonna want to hear what I have to say. This is the Candyland theory. But first, the obligatory spoiler warning. This video will contain potential spoilers for everything across the Little Nightmares universe. That includes Little Nightmares, Little Nightmares 2, Very Little Nightmares, the Sounds of Nightmares audio series, all of the Little Nightmares comics, and possibly even Little Nightmares 3. If we're right about this. And also, of course, I want to give a huge shout out to legendary Little Nightmares content creator It's Just Jord. This man has single-handedly inspired me to create this kind of content and to explore this universe in more depth, so without him I would not be where I am. So thank you so much to Jord, and if you guys for some reason don't know who he is, I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below that I highly encourage you to check out, because you will get more from his channel than you ever would from mine. Link in the description, don't forget, because if you like what I do, you're going to love his stuff. Now with that out of the way, let me start by clarifying exactly what this theory entails. I posit that at some point during this game, likely towards the end, our new friends Lo and Alone will be visiting a particularly uninviting factory, as is evident in that we see them standing amongst functioning heavy machinery towards the end of the trailer. And I believe that this is in fact, in spite of its decrepit appearance, a candy factory. Now I do understand that at first glance, this place looks like the last place you would expect to find any combination of consumable confectionaries, but before you rush to the comments section to ridicule me for my absurdity, let me present you with some evidence. In my pursuit of nightmarish knowledge, I found myself digging through the old game files, art books, comics, and of course the Sounds of Nightmares audio series, searching for any links that I could find between the existing material and the spiral. Certain that a symbol with such significance in the latest installment of the game must surely have some intricate connection to the whimsical world we know and love. And after combing through hours and hours worth of content, I eventually discovered nothing. Nothing, that is, until I happened to recall this guy. This unhappy little chappie made an appearance in episode 4 of the Little Nightmares 2 electronic comic that was available for download on mobile devices back in February of 2021. The episode sees our portly little friend doing battle with the bullies in the school section, cracking open their porcelain skulls with his signature weapon of choice, until he is inevitably cornered by the rubber-necked, unblinking abomination that is the teacher. Now, although we didn't get to meet the fat kid, as the wiki quite unkindly dubs him, we do see pictures of him hidden throughout the world. He even has an existing character model in the game files labelled Child 1, which means that our pot-bellied bully basher is in fact canon. But that isn't what interests me. What caught my attention was his weapon of choice. He's always depicted carrying a large spiral lollipop. Now, do I believe that the very conventional stylistic choice of lollipop design is a direct and intentional link to the spiral in the new Little Nightmares game? Well, no. Not really. But it did clue me into what the rest of these sticky spiral objects in the new game could be. Upon realising this intriguing little tidbit, I slowly started to piece things together. The first link that I discovered was in the factory towards the end of the trailer. The crane appears to be dumping an ungodly amount of these lollipops into a seemingly endless chasm lined with towering shelves which house several glass jars. Now, I'll come to those jars in a moment, but first I had to quench some curiosity. How are lollipops made? Well, While searching for an answer to this question, I uncovered several more potential exhibits which support the Candyland theory. Firstly, that lollipops are made by melting sugar and corn syrup together inside large, ultra-heated copper barrels, as can be seen here, which produces a thick, sticky molasses. Now, aside from the copper barrels and the large pressurized heating pot, which seems conveniently similar to the ones used inside an actual candy factory, there is also this stuff, which at first glance, and given the nature of Little Nightmares and the haunting atmosphere, you could very well assume is blood and or organs. However, a closer look had me thinking that the textures of blood and organs in the previous games don't quite align with whatever this stuff is. But you know what does? Liquid molasses right before it's shaped into sugary sweet candied treats such as gumdrops, Jolly Ranchers, and yes, lollipops. This could explain why these insects seem to swarm the stuff like wasps to a can of cola, and why the only other prominent items of note in this factory area are large glass jars. You guys may be aware that the developers of Little Nightmares seem to draw a lot of inspiration from Great Britain during the 1950s and 60s, as is evident in some of the themes and assets such as the style of the televisions, the oil radiators, and the aesthetic of the school. Upon further research and a trip to a local museum, the links between these items and my theory were all but concrete. Now I'd like to continue this video by tying off a few loose ends in the thumbnail which could use some more in-depth investigation before I can label them as explained. But before you click away, I do believe that they could have some merit given what we've learned throughout this video. Let me explain. The Sounds of Nightmares series has given us insights into the Little Nightmares universe that we've never had before, and has helped the community explain a great deal of what we didn't understand. I'd like to draw your attention to Otto, otherwise known as the therapist. Otto's been using the children in his care as a means to learn more about the Nowhere, which is the plane in which all of Little Nightmares games take place. A victim himself of childhood trauma, Otto the therapist lost his sister Cece when she was transported to the Nowhere by the notoriously elusive ferryman. The series seems to follow Otto's decline into madness as he subjects our main character, Noon, to increasingly more invasive and distressing examinations with the goal of learning how she herself accesses the Nowhere in the hopes that one day he can do the same, even if it means piggybacking on her tumor adult subconscious. So what is Otto's link to Little Nightmares 3? Well, we could speculate that the person running this factory, or at least one of the disturbing denizens benefiting from its continued operations, is Otto, having found a way to transport himself to the Nowhere and becoming trapped and warped by it, as the ferryman warned him could happen. So Otto continues on in his new, potentially grotesque and hideous form, earning trust from passing children in the best way he knew how before he made his way to the Nowhere, by offering sweets for my sweet. For context, for those of you who haven't listened to The Sounds of Nightmares, Otto would end every therapy session by offering Noon a hard candy and saying, "Sweets for my sweet."
And we can't forget your nightly confectionery. Here, Noon, take your pick. Sweets for my sweet.
So who could he be? Well, until more evidence presents itself, I may need to save that for another video. But personally, I hope he's this unfortunate soul who appears to have been playing too much Candy Crush. But it could also be cool if it turns out he was the Hanging Man, perhaps having taken his own life upon discovering what has, or hasn't, become of his beloved lost sister. And as for how sugar, sweets and lollipops relate in any way to childhood fears, I have two words for you. Stranger danger! So that's going to do it for this video, guys. What do you think of the Candyland theory? Do you think that it has substance, or am I clutching at straws? As always, I'd like to hear what you think of my thoughts and theories, and of course I would love to hear more of yours. Now real quick, I'd just like to point out some comments from my last video that I particularly enjoyed. The first is from In Absolute Darkness 13. They said, "The wax bellman could be just another form for the ferryman. Otto said that the ferryman has existed across cultures and time, and that implies that he has been given many forms. A bellman is someone who, among other things, also opens doors. He is a gatekeeper, a psychopomp, just like the ferryman is implied to be," which I think is brilliant, and that's a really, really good observation, because Otto did say that, and we have no idea how these characters age, so it could very well be that this ferryman, he's had other names. In fact, Noon calls him the Candleman. Now the wax bellman, his face was all melted and decrepit and exceedingly long, and probably a bit hard to look at. The ferryman wears a huge burlap sack over his face, so you can't really tell, but if you were to wrap a sack around the wax bellman, then potentially, yeah, we don't know. And indeed, he's right, the ferryman is implied to be a psychopomp, which is like a guide for spirits. Think Anubis from Egyptian mythology, or Charon from Greek mythology, or just think Grim Reaper. But I think that's really cool. The next one is from, and I'm sorry if I get this wrong, Lover of Yuri Gagarin 1149, and they said that Lo is the north wind. Now I had a little flick through actually, and I couldn't find anything that supports the fact that Lo is the north wind, but I do think that he could be involved with it. It's implied in the comics that the ferryman will produce a little amulet or a trinket or a keepsake, something that protects the children from the north wind. And while in possession of these items, they don't belong to anyone, they belong to the ferryman. The north wind can't touch them, that's part of the deal. And our new friend Lo happens to wear a two-tone anklet on his leg. Now that could be a semblance of some significance, or it could just be a design choice by the developers. At this point we don't know, but I thought that this comment was really interesting, so thank you very much for that. And if you have evidence to support what you said, please drop it in the comments or expand on this one, because I would love to hear more and why you believe that Lo could be the north wind. And last but by no means least, we have Retronian with a 0. They said, "I'd like to clarify that the Nowhere is the entirety of the Little Nightmares world, including the spiral, and the ferryman brings children into the Nowhere to feed the beings in control of the Nowhere, which are the eyes seen throughout the game. Each different shaped eye we see represents one of them. The name of these beings are the Spectrals. This means that there are many, many more beings like the signal tower in the Nowhere." Now I enjoyed this comment for two reasons. Number one is because it actually corrected me on a statement I made in my previous video. I was under the impression that the spiral was actually the name for the entire world of Little Nightmares. So everything, the Pale City, the Maw, the Nest, all of it was contained within the spiral, but it's not. The spiral, I think, only reflects the areas that we will be exploring in Little Nightmares 3, but the Nowhere contains the spiral. So the spiral is just another place like the Pale City, like the Maw, and like the Nest. So thank you so much for making that clear. And also the second reason I find this interesting is because I have not heard the term the Spectrals. I did a little bit of research and I wasn't able to find any references to this, but I believe you, and I think that this is something that has value. And I think that this is something that carries some weight, because it's true. There are plenty of bad guys in the world of Little Nightmares, as you know, but there's only a select few of them that seem to have superpowers. The lady with her teleportation and manipulation over darkness and turning children into gnomes, the psychic butler, the pretender and a person vaporizing hands, and of course the Thin Man. But the Spectrals could be more than that. The Spectrals, like Retronian said, are the eyes, the beings behind the eyes. They're the ones that are in control of this universe. So the signal tower itself, not the Thin Man, but the tower itself, was eventually revealed to be a living organism. And it makes you wonder if that's true for places like the Maw. Could the Maw be a spectral? Could the Nest be a spectral? Is that why we find eyes plastered all over these places as a means to surveil them? Do these eyes actually belong to the Spectrals and are simply disguised as cameras and paintings and dolls and other surveillance type materials? Again, the truth is, we don't know, because these developers are fantastic at not telling us anything. But that doesn't mean that we can't speculate. So thank you guys so much for your comments. I thoroughly enjoyed reading them, and I will be doing a small section like this at the end of future videos. So if you have thoughts and theories of your own that you think carry some weight, let me know in the comment section below, and who knows, I might even be reading yours next time. But that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Thank you all so much for being involved. Thank you especially to It's Just Jord, who inspired this video, and I really hope he doesn't mind me straight up stealing his content. But that'll do it for now. Hope you've enjoyed it. But until next time, that's game over. Bye.